Yes.
We zijn weer live.
Yes, we're back again. So I hope that everybody is still a little bit awake. I see that there's like 80 people online at still at this moment. So a few people left off. Maybe they heard enough, or maybe they're still quite tired of the whole thing. We have our room full with our speakers. And what we're going to do is to have a little of a recap for the speakers themselves, because I learned a few new things, because I invited you to present, but I didn't know exactly what you're going to tell. And then I'll ask any one of them and then we have some discussions, maybe stemming from the questions from the chat, maybe something that just pops up during the whole thing. And we will, we end at 1600 hours at the latest, but maybe a little bit sooner if we look like we're too tired. So let's do it. So if I have listened to your presentations, I was really impressed by, well, that you really try to do a thorough job in looking from the perspective of like a psychrometrist. Well, what is the actual consistency of measurement between the system and the user, or maybe a human grader? And I think it's very important for us to go into this, because people will always ask this, how exact is this LLM grading? So that's really nice. And the other thing that struck me actually was we use the word rubric quite often, but these rubrics can be very different from one another. So if I talk about rubrics, I always think about the rubrics as being the matrix. And not from the film, but from, say, we have like the criterions, we have the levels of performance, and you write in the cells what the performance looks like, and then that is the rubric in my perspective. And you use the rubric in a different way. I would call this, for example, a grading scheme, or a scoring scheme, or something else. So I think it should be very clear when we talk about grading with AI, what we exactly mean with scoring. So that was what struck me actually at the thing. So Emily, what did you learn from the other presentations in my presentation?
I've noticed that most of you are using proprietary models. So at University of Groningen, we are very strict about this. So maybe that goes into the privacy issues a little bit. So I see that maybe there is nothing to be afraid of that much using that. So there is also cost attached to using those models, even though they are very small.
Yeah.
So compared to human cost. This is something that we will, I will bring back to my office, to my team.
I think it would be nice.
Also about the rubrics, you are right. So I heard about that as well. But something that we also thought as a next step is LLM can do a very good job at checking whether these rubrics or grading schema is achieved or not. But is this really what we want? So can we give LLMs the objectives of the course or the objectives?
Zijn we nog verstaanbaar? Want het beeld hangt even vast.
Right.
Zijn we nog? Are we still? Can you still hear us?
Yeah, I think.
Yes. People can hear us.
I'll
try to fix the images. All right. You try to fix the video. Okay, I think that's a very good remark. So feeding them with the learning goal or something, and then do something with it.
Yes, exactly, and see if we can use LLMs to check this is achieved or not.
All right, that's a very interesting topic also. Yeah, right, great.
So
Okay.
we try to do that in a very limited capacity for the feedbacking.
Yeah.
The feedback prompts included learning goals for different questions, but we didn't spend that much time optimizing the feedback, and it wasn't brilliant, and it wasn't super good at picking that up just baseline. So I think it could be possible, but this is probably a tricky issue.
We are thinking of some sort of mapping between these learning objectives and these criteria, grading schemes, or the points. So, well, you still need to be very precise about this. So you don't expect LLMs to figure it out by themselves, but the more precise you are, the better output you will get, most probably. But all right, something to be investigated.
Okay, great. I'll move on to Paco.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me was that the type of questions is also very telling for the results. So you had coding questions, and that the large language models were a lot stricter than the humans, whereas I think in argument, it would usually be the other way around. So that really made me think of, there's not a one size fits all kind of thing. You actually have to be looking at all these different kind of stuff separately. So that was a gotcha moment for me. And another one was your thing about the EU legislation. Yeah, I mean, it's very important, but it's also a kind of a big kind of thing that I didn't really think a lot about. And I really liked your explanation of that there are like larger kind of goals and things to think about, and then a few specific kind of points that are also by SURF to do, and that made it a lot more tangible, like than what I had in my head.
Like big AI actors.
Yeah, this AI stuff, which of course is important, but I didn't have the time yet to really dive into it, so it was very nice. Summary.
Good. Luke, what did you learn or think?
Yeah, I was, to me, it was very cool in the beginning to see the web app that you developed, because I think some of the people in the chat also picked up on the question, hey, is this something that everybody can do, any teacher, or can it only be the programming teachers because they have the knowledge necessary? And I think your UI looked pretty user-friendly, and I think it would be super cool to use something like that. And then also it struck me how, because my big problem right now was, oh, I only have this programming course, I only have data from that course, but it struck me to see the results that you have for other courses and how that worked, and that was really cool. And I was also surprised how well it still worked with just evaluating the entire thing all at once. That really struck me, because I would have, a priori, I would have assumed, oh, that's just way too many tokens, it will lose track, but on average in the scoring realm it seems to be really nice.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool too. You just chuck in the whole answer, the whole thing, and then it does its work. It's like amazing.
And in a very small model.
Yeah,
That was really stuck with it too. So anybody else in the room who likes to respond to what they have learned? Maybe you, Arjen, or maybe you, Isabella, or maybe you, Esther, or maybe you, Tegla?
Well, I found it a very interesting, all the talks. I am not a technician, I'm a teacher. But I really like the fact that we had conversations about our own grading and also our own use of rubrics. For instance, I saw some questions also online, like what happens with the rubric while the grading of the AI is going on. Can we put the rubric, you have to put the rubric up front in your syllabus. What happens if it doesn't turn out to be right or right for grading? You cannot change it, so because you already talked about it. So it's really about also the transparency towards our students on what they are graded on, because a good rubric, as is also said in the chat, is also helpful for a student to make good work. So I found that very interesting, and I every time we talk about something like this, I realize how much non-technical questions there are to embed and implement this in the right.
Yeah. I think they're all in play. Yeah. So maybe you can do a little round, or maybe you have a question at the moment?
I don't have a question.
No. Tekla, do you have a question that pops up in your mind? Okay, maybe we can go around a little bit and then check a little bit in the chat if there's something pops up now. So I think it was very interesting because of the discussion of should you change the rubric while you're grading. I think, well, for transparency reasons and to be fair to students, you should not change the rubrics itself, of course. But then I know, because I use rubrics to grade like all kinds of assignments, that the rubrics are not like rock solid or something. They're very open, they get very multi-interpretable. So I think it's actually quite natural to then look at the rubric, then look at what the AI says actually, and then say, well, I had a little look at it, but I thought it would be more like this, and it should be more like this, and it should be more strict like this. And it then feeds into the modeling process without changing the original rubric. It's still the same, but then it gives like a more context to what the rubric actually should measure then. And if you then put it also in the feedback to the student, well, the teacher has said, well, given that you weigh A, B, and C, I extracted the point from the AI or something, then it's also very transparent why the teacher said it should be a little bit different. But well, it's
You
complicated.
learn from the year afterwards by specifying for your students.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. So I think that was indeed an interesting situation here. The other thing that strikes me a little bit, it's a little bit in the chat. It's about the privacy and security. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding there how stuff works actually. So I saw you work with a proprietary model, the
Open
8-bit
source.
model, open source model, on your own server.
Yeah.
So you know everything. I can see it's under my desk.
Yeah.
So we have the model, and the model is actually just like a file. Yeah, it's not like a big thing with dispersed over all kinds of clouds or somewhere. It's just a file on your computer, and then you own the interface. So you know everything stays within. If the thing that I showed you with the Lovable, it's on Azure AI. So we have Azure infrastructure. It's off the Vue, so nobody else but few people can get there. And you have a little strict part that's taken from it, and there's like this file, this AI GPT-4o model, and we talk with that model. So nobody else can access anything that we do, except maybe from the interplay of all these things. But it's all standardized API. It's all kind of standardized technology. So nothing happens there. So I think sometimes this idea that stuff gets out in the open is sometimes a little bit overdreven, how you call it, a little bit exaggerated actually. So I think people should get more understanding of how it actually works, and then try to talk about, is this really unsafe or not? So it's not about working with OpenAI. No, it's about working with the model of OpenAI that maybe sits on Azure AI computers that we as VU University actually hired from Microsoft, and nobody else accesses it than us. People should be aware of these kinds of technical things, I believe.
If I make a comment on this, how about if we need to use copyrighted material to grade the exams?
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, some books, some courses use books, and those books can be copyrighted.
Yeah.
So I've also shown that using course material is not helpful. So
Yeah, that's great.
so maybe we have a solution for that. But what if a copyrighted material is required to grade an exam?
I would think the following. So if you have like a copyrighted book, and you would copy it in a file, and you put it on OneDrive, in your own OneDrive, would you think that's a big copyright violation?
So yeah, well, the discussion starts at least.
But you know, it's on my OneDrive. I only can access it. I didn't even put it on Canvas so that students can access it, because then you're going a little bit further in opening it up. And actually using these LLM models is the same as your own document somewhere in a drive where you use it to do other kinds of stuff with it. But I think, well, it would not be the biggest problem actually, to be honest, because you don't put it out in the open. You just use it for this particular topic use.
Yeah.
It's not different than having a file on your OneDrive. Yes.
It just talking as advocate of the devil, I think that most people are scared that Silicon Valley doesn't have a very strong reputation in following their agreements, right?
Maybe, yeah.
So if you have a few Azure cloud, then you trust Microsoft to actually follow the contract that the FU signed with
You
Microsoft.
have to stick on something, yeah?
Yeah. So and I think there's a lot of and I think rightfully so, right? I mean, there's now also a copyright case between Disney and OpenAI, because the Midjourney. Because Midjourney, of course, said that they wouldn't, but they violated the copyright. However, I also think that if Microsoft would break this contract, they have a very, very big problem.
Very, very, very big problem.
Yeah. So in that sense, I also, maybe it's a little bit over exaggerated, but yeah. So it's a bit of a discussion, and I think, yeah, if we have a strong legal team, or the university has a strong legal team, they should be able to fight any problems, and you kind of try to manage the risk. You don't try to completely ban.
No, you try to
ban
manage
out
the risk.
basically. I mean, they could violate copyright anytime. It's a possibility.
Yeah, there is no alternative than to trust our contracts. They
Yes.
have, we
No,
have to
but,
trust it.
uh,
If we lose that, yeah, we can finish
You can
off.
stop with everything.
A question from Wilma,
Yeah.
an interesting one. She says all of the cases are very much focused on metrics, of course.
Yeah.
That's the focus. But she'll be interested in more insight in the process of grading, like what kind of criteria works best. What are the things that cause problems? as we've seen with yours, that distracting maybe is worse than putting. Where exactly are the biggest differences in grading between teacher? I think Wilma means between teacher and AI. So per criterion, did any one of you get insights in that kind of information?
So I talked about it a little bit, and I think the sentiment was, I think you had it in your slides, that probably the efforts of teachers will switch towards creating good rubrics away from grading. And I think really good rubrics that are easy to evaluate for humans will likely also be easier to be evaluated by a large language. So I think that is something that would work well. The reality is that many teachers grade their courses only based on answer keys, example solutions. And what I find super interesting is that we have some evidence in our disagreements that they sometimes caused the model to stray away from rubrics. So very clear example, the student had to create a plot. We did not care what variable was on the x-axis and what on the y-axis, but in our example solution, we made a specific choice. And this caused the model to subtract points if the student deviated from our examples. And then I think you also you found that the example solutions actually work quite well, right? If I remember that correctly. So this could also again be more specific. So I think it is very difficult to make these general points about that question.
Okay. I hope, Wilma, that answers your question. It's still something that we really have to discuss further. I also have a question from Oscar, and maybe we can ask Isabella on that, because Oscar has heard you about what would students say when their AI would be, when AI would assess their work. And Oscar refers to a student who said, if I know my work will be assessed by an AI, I will make my work in a different way. Well, we have Isabella, who is maybe with two hats because she's also an AI student. So, but how can what do you think? Because you talk with fellow students.
Yeah. I mean, I think as someone who has, had a lot of work graded by TAs and also has been a TA and has spoken to fellow TAs, I think grading as it is now is very personal and it depends so much on the teacher. And when I compared my assignments to other students, we had a very comparable assignment, but completely different grades. So I do think that this way of grading can actually make so much insightful to teachers also in your research, that it can really tell teachers about the way they grade and point them to mistakes that they've been making that AI can catch very easily. So I do think I would appreciate it, because I do think it would, be a lot fairer than the way that assignments are graded now, especially small assignments that are graded by students that are sometimes only 1 year above.
Would you make your assignments yourself differently if you would know that it would be assessed by AI?
I think so.
In what way?
Well, I mean, I guess you would kind of you would upload your assignment to some sort of AI, for example, ChatGPT, and kind of see their feedback and really improve or change your assignment based on that feedback rather than what you maybe think is best or what you think your teacher would appreciate most. However, I don't know if I would say that this is what a regular student would do, or like any student would do. I don't think a lot of students would think this way. And I think that would also be a shame. So that's why I think it's so important to keep the human in the loop, so the student doesn't feel like they need to just trick AI to get a higher score, but actually still focus on what would be the best results.
I think it was an interesting topic that you said. Well, maybe the AI grade should teach the teacher on how to grade, which is a different way around actually. Because the AI could maybe do a better job, and then you could have a look at teacher afterwards to help yourself. But so I was just thinking about this whole problem actually. Okay, I think that's very interesting.
Oscar, would that answer your question a bit? I think if you're able to talk to your own students to ask this, let's all do that.
Yeah. So maybe there is maybe one or two other things that might be of interest at this point to discuss.
I actually think, especially now that we heard the student perspective, I think a very feasible next step forward that would combine all of the things that we talked about, potentially fairer grading by large language models, but also transparency efforts would be, and the human in the loop approach would be to actually grade students using these models, but give them a completely transparent, comprehensive report about how many points they received for every single question of the exam, for example, and the reasoning behind that, as explained by the large language model, and then give the students the opportunity to point out mistakes and have it be regraded by teachers, and also implement data-driven ways of quantifying the certainty, similar to what you have been doing, of LLM grades. So if I ask the same model 10 times, and I get 5 times 4 points, 5 times 50 points, then maybe this is an indicator that a human should regrade that question. I think that this is a very interesting and potentially feasible way forward.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So do the reiteration.
Yeah, just like precision gives.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that is something that now also Raft, I hope I say your name right, says also, can students grade themselves using the rubrics? I think this whole process allows for students to become part of the assessment, right? And try getting assessment more into the learning.
Yeah, maybe like will do. There was one interesting thing that also came to my mind, which was asked in the chat, I believe, but it's always asked for, okay, but these LLMs, they are biased because they're trained with all kinds of data in a certain direction. And I was always wondering, okay, what would then be the effect in grading assessment or assignments as we just discussed over here? So like in, say, statistics or in, say, law or in, say, whatever thing that we, so I was trying to get my head around what would then be the bias. Would women use other language than boys on average? And would this LLM then pick this up and say, you get less points or something when I grade it because you have a female tone to writing or something? I was really trying to figure out how this would work. Or would someone who's not so a native speaker in a certain language would then get lower grades? I know in the prompt you could say, well, ignore spelling, grammar and grammar mistakes, for example. You can put it in the prompt. So I'm just trying to get my head around this problem. Did you look into these kinds of problems? Because it's very easy to mention this kind of a problem, but is it actually a problem that we should investigate in this particular area?
Well, there's now some research that indicates that what they say isn't always reflective of what they do. So, for instance, the math.
Who are they? Who are they?
The large language models.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, for instance, a calculation, when you ask to multiply a number, it's usually correct, or some actually. But then there's research where they show that, well, actually, they don't really use the rules that they explain. So when you ask, I see somebody respond in shock, and it's by Anthropic, so it's a very renowned, one of the big creators. They discovered that. So please use calculator, not only for the environment. So it's kind of a big problem. I agree, and I can imagine that if the rubric is very biased, there's a lot of women in education, so I can maybe imagine being the other way around, honestly, where the rubric is created only by women, and they have a certain tone of voice, and
the rubric is created by a woman instead of a man.
We're just completely right. I mean, I'm not saying it's happening. I'm saying, like, theoretically, I think if the bias would be for me in the rubric, and not necessarily, and that bias will be taken over by the large language model. That's how it would work, in my opinion.
Yeah, because we talked about bias, and Arjen also said that bias sometimes not able to detect on a one assignment level. So if, like, within your institute you have many of AI assessed assignments and tests, then you can see if there's an overall bias. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
that's the evaluate and adjust approach. So
Yeah.
the evaluation and adjustment very important in case of the AI Act.
Mhm.
So not based on the individual grade of the student. That's been passed, but you can evaluate, for instance, yearly.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do.
Yeah.
How do you detect bias? I think we have reason to think that
Is there anybody hearing us?
Well, our
Audio's
internet
on.
connection is
Oh,
also.
and back. We're back. Are we back?
Oh.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry. We're back.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I think
You
it
just had the most lovely discussion and you missed it.
we just solved it.
I just solved the problem. I think it's very interesting indeed to see at the program level if something really goes wrong. That would be the case.
I have another question.
yeah, and that's also no one thing. If you look at what is the responsibility of the institution, it's to that we give diplomas not biased, not biased in giving diplomas. More important on the diploma level than it is on the specific score of one item on the test.
Yeah, but if you have a lot of bias, then maybe somebody don't reach the diploma level, right?
Well, there's a drop off of females would be higher. Okay, but
Can I ask?
Yeah.
So I have one more question from Adi, and I have some people also wanting to have that question asked.
Okay, then we-
Just say it. I'm not sure if I understand the question, but let's go. So a really good rubric is the key. So we're back on the rubric. If it's shared with students and if they understand it, they improve their grade. If the student shares the rubric with AI and has AI improve or do the work, AI has learned and the student might have learned. How can we measure what needs to be measured? I think this is AI assessing AI question.
yes, that is.
Is that correct, Abby?
It's a really interesting point. We were talking in the break about
Okay.
getting data from other courses, and one concern that some teachers expressed was actually exactly that. What if my course data is exposed to an AI model? Will the student next year be able to ask that model, how do I get a good grade in this course at that university?
Yeah.
And I think this is a concern with respect to sharing rubrics with students. I think there is a distinction to be made between very general rubrics that are typically shared with students for thesis, for example, very, very specific rubrics for certain tasks where I don't know if it's always necessary.
Say grading schemes.
Say grading
Grading schemes, rubrics. I try to
Yeah.
distinguish between them.
So I don't know if those have to be shared always. But this is definitely a potential problem for any assessment because back when I was a student, after every exam, we would just sit together
Collect
and
all the questions.
take all the questions from memory and share them with the next year. And now this is not only shared with the next year, it's shared with models. And I don't think we will be able to avoid that at all. Maybe this means that teachers have to come up with new questions every year now instead of recycling.
Yeah, they already should, of course. I also try to name this thing using generative AI for exams. So students not accessing, not being aware of the actual questions that they get. Of course, they have some idea what the assessment is about, but that's something that they can use AI for to give the answers and then have the AI grade them. So that's why I limited a little bit to exams actually, but there might be like gray areas in this respect.
And it also relates to the law question again, because when you use large language models on a larger scale, so it's not about you chatting in a free account, but if you actually pay them and sometimes 30 euros, sometimes 100 euros for an exam, depending on your what your usage is. But then there's a contract between you and the provider that this data is not being used for training. So it's not free anymore. You pay money. And part of the contract is that they don't use your data as training data. So it's a big difference from teachers having a free account and copy pasting the answers and the questions into Excel and hitting enter.
Yeah.
Than the kind of systems that we are building. That's a very important distinction.
It aligns, I think, with Sharon's question, who already asked it twice. Sorry, Sharon, for that. How can we keep these developments in-house? I'm afraid these functionalities will be built into LMSs and assessment systems, and that we will not have any ownership on these functions. That is.
So I know that Surf is also thinking about creating maybe I'm but
No.
They're creating part of the Groningen what do you call that? Damages repair kind of payments. They were creating a large language model there for research purposes. So then it would be part of the Dutch government.
Yeah.
Arjen, I think you can.
Yeah, we as a VU are, I did an application for money for 2026 to do a tender. I mean, in the EdTech Marktplaats of Surf to ask vendor to develop together with us a system that follows kind of the structures that Esther showed. When we do it as an enhancement on existing systems.
Yeah, what you did with the canvas.
Yeah. Not to replace canvas functions, but to use the canvas functions and put the input, the output back there again. So.
Yeah, and I think because I have Karen here, who is a supplier of an assessment system. Hi, Karen.
Yeah.
She would like to turn the question around. If we build this functionality, what kind of control or ownership would you expect to retain? That way, we can design a solution that aligns with needs and keeps you in the driver's seat. So that is, I think, also the discussion with those.
I can mention those things, that it is on our own language modules for we control.
Yeah.
The data.
On the data, it's those are the most important things, I think. Also, the more you mentioned also the difference between different disciplines within in university, so, and also educational values. So these prompts we use are not neutral. They always have some educational value or some other values hidden within it.
Yeah.
And if we don't have control of it or don't have influence on it, it's part of the intellectual property of a that could be a problem.
Yeah. This brings me to a natural point in which the clock ticks 16:00 within less than 1 minute. So I'd like to finish off this whole session. For now, I really like to thank everybody that was online. So we started off with around about 120 people, and now still like 60 people are around. So I think that's a reasonable score for all the things that I know that take place online. I would like to thank all my presenters from Groningen, from the UVA, from Delft, Vaco, Emin, and I forgot your name again, but Luke, sorry, for being here. And we will send out some information about the whole session. We recorded the whole thing, so you'll be informed. We try to get the PowerPoints and I'll send them to you. And we hopefully see you next time at another event for maybe NPulse, for maybe Surf, for maybe other kinds of people. Thank you very much and have a good day further on.